The village of Ileri existed in a state of perpetual amber, a settlement built not just of mud brick and thatch, but of devotion to the dying sun. Here, the people were sun-catchers, artisans of profound and sacred purpose. They believed the sun, the great Olorun, did not simply vanish each evening. He fell, and in that final glorious descent, he released a single potent whisper, a condensation of the day's wisdom, regrets, and blessings. It was the duty of the sun-catchers to carve wooden masks so pure, so resonant, that they could catch this whisper, giving Olorun a voice in the world of men during the sacred solar fall ceremony. Kola, at 17, carried this tradition in his skilled hands and a much heavier burden in his heart. His fingers, long and sensitive, could feel the memory of sunlight trapped within a block of cedar or mahogany. He could carve a mask that seemed to hold its own inner dawn. But his soul was shadowed by the ghost of his father, Aiye, the greatest sun-catcher in living memory. A man who had not died, but had vanished one night a year ago, leaving behind a legacy of brilliance and a single, terrifying, unfinished mask. "The masks are bridges, Kola," his uncle Bamidele intoned that afternoon. Bamidele was a man carved from the same stern wood as the sacred Iroko tree that dominated the village center. He ran a hand over a finished mask, its surface smooth, its expression serene. "They are vessels for divine breath," Bamidele said. "We fill them with our prayers, and Olorun fills them with his wisdom. But a mask," his voice dropped, his eyes cutting towards a shadowy alcove at the back of the workshop. "A mask that is not completed before its ordained solar fall is an abomination. It is a soul without a body, a prayer without a destination. It is Aiye, cursed, wild, untethered from both the divine and the mortal. It must never, ever be worn. Your father forgot this. His ambition blinded him to the danger. Do not make his mistake." The object of his uncle's warning was Kola's secret obsession, his father's final, unfinished work. It was carved from a wood so dark it seemed to have been born from the heart of a moonless night. Unlike the smooth, polished, and anthropomorphic masks of the tradition, this one was raw, its edges sharp, its surface a chaotic tapestry of spirals and jagged lines that threatened to snag the light and never let it go. Most unnerving were its eyes, two deep, vacant hollows that promised nothing, reflected nothing, and demanded everything. It was a mask of profound, absolute silence, and it called to the silent, gaping wound of loss within Kola with a force that frightened him. The Solar Fall Festival transformed Ileri. As the sun began its slow, bleeding descent, the air grew thick with the scent of incense and roasting nuts. The villagers, dressed in their finest white linens, gathered in the great square, each holding a beautifully finished mask before their faces. A low, unified hum began to rise from the crowd, a harmonic chant meant to build a sonic bridge for Olorun's whisper to travel upon. The energy was palpable, a thrumming in the very earth. Kola stood among them, his own expertly carved mask feeling like a child's toy in his hands. The memory of his father's mask, hidden away in its dark corner, was a drumbeat in his skull drowning out the sacred chants. The law was the bedrock of their society. The danger was as real as the setting sun. But the need to understand, to feel some connection to the father who had abandoned him without a word, was a physical ache, a compulsion he could no longer resist. He slipped away from the vibrating crowd, the rhythmic chanting fading behind him as he entered the profound silence of the sacred workshop. Moonlight streamed through a single window, illuminating the dark mask where it lay. It seemed to drink the silver light, becoming a deeper void in the room. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drum against the stillness. He knew the consequence. He knew the taboo. He broke the law. His hands, usually so steady, trembled as he lifted the cold, unnaturally heavy wood. He tied the leather thongs behind his head, the mask settling against his face. The world vanished, replaced by the dark, close confines of the carved wood and the sound of his own ragged, panicked breathing echoing in the small space. For 3 terrifying heartbeats, there was nothing. Then a presence unfolded in his mind. It was not a sound that entered through his ears, but a consciousness that inserted itself directly into his thoughts. It was ancient, dry, and vast. Its voice was the mental equivalent of the wind scouring a billion-year-old desert. "You are not the carver," the presence observed, its tone of one of detached intellectual curiosity. "You are the progeny, the seeker. You wear your curiosity like a shroud." Kola's mind screamed, a silent internal cry. "My father, Adewale, where is he?" The mask's response was a psychic rustle, the feeling of ancient parchment crumbling. The carver was a man of great talent, but limited vision. He sought to carve a mask that could hear not just Olorun's light, but also his shadow. He succeeded. "I am that vessel." But when I offered him the truth he so desperately sought, his fragile understanding shattered. He was a man who loved the idea of truth, but could not bear its weight. He fled into the night, a broken man, afraid of the very shadow that gives his precious light its meaning and its shape. Before Kola could process this, a sound from the outside world pierced the psychic connection. A woman's shriek of pure terror ripped from her throat. It was followed by a cascading wave of shouts, cries, and wails that tore the holy night to shreds. He scrambled, fingers fumbling with the ties, and ripped the mask from his face, stumbling back out into the village square. The scene was one of apocalyptic panic. The villagers were no longer chanting. They were screaming, pointing, clutching each other. Their eyes were fixed on the great solar tree, the ancient, gargantuan Iroko that was the heart of Ileri and the symbol of their covenant with Olorun. Its leaves, always a vibrant, life-affirming green, were withering before their very eyes. They curled inward, desiccating, their color leaching away into a sickly, deathly gray, falling like ash and snow to the ground. The very air around the tree seemed to grow cold and thin. Chief Bamidele stood before the dying tree, his face a grotesque mask of fury and primal fear. His body was rigid, his fists clenched. His gaze, wild and searching, swept over the panicked crowd, and then for a fraction of a second too long, locked onto Kola. A silent, accusatory recognition passed between them. "The balance is shattered," Bamidele roared, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. "A sacred silence has been profaned. A forbidden thing has been done." He paused, letting the terror build, before pointing a dramatic, trembling finger towards the dark surrounding forest. "The unfinished mask, the cursed creation of the fallen Adebele, has been stolen from its prison. The wild spirits of the Aiye have taken it. They seek to use its cursed power to silence Olorun's voice forever and plunge our world into eternal shadow." The villagers, desperate for a target for their fear, seized upon this explanation. Their terror turned to rage. Cries for a hunt, for vengeance filled the air. They believed their chief. They saw an external enemy, a monstrous thief from the wild. But Kola stood utterly still, a cold, hard certainty crystallizing in his veins. The mask was not stolen. It was right there in the workshop, still humming with the residual psychic warmth from his own face. His uncle, the stern guardian of their most sacred laws, the man who had spoken of his father's failure with such contempt, had just looked at him and told a breathtaking, calculated, and deliberate lie to every single person in the village. The mask had whispered that his father fled from a terrifying truth. Now, his uncle was creating a convenient lie to hide what? As the village mobilized for a hunt that would lead them on a wild goose chase into the forest, Kola understood his true path was not with them. He was alone. He held the dangerous talking artifact. He knew the chief was a liar. To find his father and uncover what was truly killing their world, he would have to dive headfirst into the very darkness his people had been taught to fear, and listen to the very voice that had driven his father mad. The forest swallowed Kola whole. The vibrant, sun-dappled greens of the periphery gave way to a tangled labyrinth of deep shadows and unnerving silence. The triumphant war cries of the village hunting party faded behind him, their direction completely wrong. With each step deeper into the thicket, the weight of the unfinished mask, now wrapped in cloth and secured to his belt, seemed to grow heavier, a cold lodestone pulling him toward an unknown fate. He was alone, armed only with a small skin of water, a hunting knife, and a terrifying artifact that whispered secrets in the dark. Deeper. The mask's voice rustled in his mind, a sound like dried insects scuttling over stone. The carver did not flee toward the mountains, as the loud one with the lying tongue claims. He fled toward the heart of the silence. He sought the first tree. The first tree, Kola thought, his hand resting on the wrapped mask as if it were a compass. The stories say it's a myth, the source of all wood, where the first sun catcher learned his art. All myths are truths wrapped in the fear of small minds. The loud one, your uncle, he knows it is real. His fear of it is a stench that clogs the air. For 2 days, Kola followed the mask's disquieting guidance. The forest grew stranger. The trees here were twisted, their bark resembling the same spiraling, chaotic patterns carved into the mask. The air grew cold, and the usual sounds of life, the chatter of monkeys, the songs of birds, vanished, replaced by a profound, watchful silence. He found signs of another traveler, a recently broken branch, a footprint in a patch of soft earth that was too large to be an animal's. Hope, fierce and desperate, flared in his chest. His father was alive. He was here. On the 3rd day, he found the camp. It was a small, desperate shelter tucked against a giant moss-covered rock, a cold fire pit, a discarded water gourd, and a single beautifully carved wooden cup, a style Kola recognized instantly as his father's. But the shelter was empty. As he examined the cup, a figure emerged from the shadows between the trees. It was not his father. It was a woman, her skin the color of rich mahogany, her hair a wild cascade of braids intertwined with fresh leaves and feathers. She wore simple, practical leathers and held a spear tipped with obsidian that gleamed with a dark light. Her eyes, the color of dark amber, held no fear, only a deep, ancient knowing. She was one of the Aiye, the wild ones his uncle had vilified. "You carry the silence eater," she said, her voice low and melodic yet firm as stone. She pointed her spear not at Kola, but at the wrapped mask on his belt. "Why does a child of the sun catchers bring that curse into our lands?" Kola's hand went to his knife. "I seek my father, Adewale. The mask, it told me he came this way." The woman, who introduced herself as Neoma, a guardian of the Aiye, let out a short, bitter laugh. "The mask told you? Foolish boy, it does not speak, it consumes. It consumes silence and secrets, and eventually it consumes the mind of the one who wears it. Your father learned this too late." She gestured for him to follow. Deeper into the sacred grove of the Aiye, she showed him something that made his blood run cold. carved into the trunks of several ancient trees, were masks. But these were not the polished, serene vessels of Ileri. These were rough, anguished faces, their mouths open in silent screams, their eyes wide with terror. They were warnings. "These are the true unfinished masks," Neoma explained, her hand resting gently on one of the tormented carvings. "They are not vessels for a god's voice. They are prisons for the voices the sun-catchers have tried to silence, the cries of the forest they have cut, the pleas of the earth they have ignored. Your people do not listen to Olorun's whisper. They filter it, hearing only what comforts them. The shadow, the pain, the hard truths, they trap them in these cursed woods, calling them Aiye." The plot twist struck Kola with the force of a physical blow. The entire foundation of his belief system crumbled. The masks weren't sacred transmitters. They were filters, tools of denial. The cursed unfinished masks were the ones that, by some flaw or power, refused to be filtered. They held the raw, unfiltered, and often terrible truth. "She sees, but not completely," the mask whispered, its voice a sly, insidious thread in his mind. "The carver, your father, he finally saw. He learned the ultimate truth that the loud one, the chief, has killed to protect." Killed? Kola thought, his mind reeling. The previous chief, the loud one's own brother, your grandfather, did not die of a fever. He discovered that the solar tree is not a gift from Olorun. It is a lock. And the ceremonial masks are the keys that keep it sealed, trapping the raw, chaotic, and magnificent power of creation, what you call the Aiye, behind it. Your uncle murdered him to protect the lie that keeps your village in power. Your father discovered this and fled his brother's wrath. Neoma, seeing the dawning horror on Kola's face, misread its source. "Now you understand the danger you carry. Your father, Adewale, he rests with us. The mask's truth broke him. He is not the man you remember." She led him to a small, sheltered hut at the edge of their village. Inside, sitting and staring blankly at a wall, was Adewale. He was gaunt, his hair prematurely white, his once skilled hands now lying limp in his lap. His eyes, when they turned to Kola, were empty wells of trauma. He showed no recognition, only a faint, terrified flinching at the sight of another human. The hope in Kola's heart shattered. He had found his father, but the brilliant sun-catcher was gone, his mind hollowed out by the very truth Kola now possessed. Suddenly, a shout echoed from the edge of the Aiye village. A scout came running, his face etched with panic. "The sun-catchers, their hunting party, led by their chief, they have found us. They are tearing through the grove." Kola rushed to the edge of the clearing. Through the trees, he saw his uncle, Bamadele, his face a grotesque mask of fanatical rage, leading a group of armed villagers. They were not just searching, they were desecrating, hacking at the ancient carved trees. Bamadele's eyes met Kola's across the clearing. There was no surprise in them, just a cold, final resolve. He knew Kola had the mask. He knew he had learned the truth. "The boy has been corrupted by the Aiye," Bamadele screamed to his men, pointing directly at Kola. "He has allied with the very forces that seek to destroy us. He and the wild ones have the cursed mask. Seize them. Retrieve the mask at all costs." The villagers, their fear weaponized by their chief's lies, surged forward. Kola stood frozen, trapped between the world he once knew, which was now hunting him, and the terrifying new world of truth that had broken his father. The mask on his belt felt less like a key and more like a death sentence. Chaos erupted in the sacred grove. The Aiye warriors, armed with spears and a fierce love for their land, clashed with the fanatical villagers of Ileri, who fought with the blind conviction of the deceived. The air, once filled with a profound silence, was now thick with shouts, the clash of wood on metal, and the guttural cries of combat. Kola stood frozen in the eye of the storm, the wrapped mask a burning brand against his hip. He saw his uncle, Bamidele, not as a leader protecting his people, but as a cornered animal, his eyes wild with the terror of a secret about to be exposed. "He fears you," the mask whispered, its voice a chillingly calm center in the maelstrom of his mind. "He does not fear the Aiye. He fears the truth you carry, the truth that will unmask him as a murderer and a usurper." Ineoma moved to his side, her obsidian spear held ready. "They will not listen to words, Suncatcher. Your uncle has poisoned their minds. We must fight." But Kola's eyes were fixed on the hollowed-out shell of his father, Adiwale, who was being shielded by an Aiye elder trembling at the violence. He saw the villagers, people he had grown up with, shared meals with, their faces twisted into unrecognizable masks of fear and hatred. Fighting them felt like cutting off his own limb. There had to be another way. The truth wasn't a weapon to be wielded in battle. It was a light that had to be shown, no matter how blinding. "He's not after you," Kola yelled, his voice cutting through the din. He was not shouting at the villagers, but directly at his uncle, his finger pointing in accusation. "He's after me. He's after this." He tore the mask from his belt, holding the dark, spiraling wood high for all to see. The fighting around him stuttered, eyes drawn to the infamous unfinished mask. Bamidele's face contorted in rage. "See, the corruption speaks. He wields the cursed object. He is lost. Kill him and retrieve it." "He killed my grandfather," Kola's voice broke with the sheer force of the declaration. "Your former chief, his own brother. He murdered him to protect the lie that the solar tree is a blessing. It is not a blessing, it is a prison, and our masks are not prayers, they are the locks that keep it sealed." A stunned silence fell, so profound that the heavy breathing of the combatants was the only sound. The villagers stared, confused and horrified. It was a claim so monstrous, so blasphemous, it teetered on the edge of insanity. Bamidele laughed, a harsh, desperate sound. "The boy is mad. The mask has consumed his mind as it consumed his father's." "He lies," the mask hissed, "but words are weak. You must show them. You must make them see what the carver saw. You must make the sun fall." The final, terrifying piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The mask wasn't just a receptacle for truth. It was a key, not just any key, the master key, the one mask that could unlock the primal, unfiltered truth trapped within the solar tree. Ignoring his uncle's sputtered denials, ignoring the confused stares, Kola turned his back on the battle and ran. He ran not toward the Aiye, not toward the village, but straight for the heart of the conflict, the great, withering Iroko tree in the center of the grove, a tree that was a twin to the one dying in Ileri. "Stop him!" Bamidele shrieked, his voice raw with a terror that was now unmistakably genuine. But it was too late. As Kola reached the base of the massive, dying tree, he felt a pull, a resonance between the wood in his hands and the ancient wood before him. He didn't need guidance. He knew what to do. As the last sliver of the sun dipped below the horizon, he lifted the unfinished mask to his face. The world did not just fall silent. It inverted. The psychic voice of the mask exploded into a symphony of 1,000 screaming truths. He heard the last thoughts of the tree his grandfather had cut to make his first mask. a silent scream of agony. He felt the suppressed fears of generations of suncatchers, their doubts, their hidden cruelties. He saw the moment his uncle, a young Bunny, driven by a twisted desire to protect his people's purity, held a pillow over the face of the ailing chief who had discovered the terrible secret of their covenant. It was not a covenant with a god, but a desperate, ancient bargain with the raw, chaotic force of creation. The Aiye, to suppress its wildness, to create a manageable, sunlit world at the cost of caging half of existence. And then he heard it. Not a whisper, but a roar. The true voice of Olorun was not one of gentle wisdom, but a deafening, simultaneous cry of all life, all light, all shadow, all joy, and all pain. It was beautiful and terrifying too, vast for any one mind to hold. The unfinished mask, pressed against the bark of the tree, began to glow with a black, devouring light. The spirals on its surface swirled like liquid night, a corresponding light not of gold, but of brilliant, blinding white erupted from the heart of the Iroko tree. There was no explosion of wood and sap, but an explosion of perception. A wave of pure, unfiltered truth radiated outwards, washing over the grove. Every single person, villager and Aiye alike, was frozen in place. For a single, shattering moment, they all saw. They saw the murder. They felt the tree's pain. They understood the cage they had lived in and the true, wild, magnificent nature of the world they had been taught to fear. The wave passed. The unfinished mask crumbled in Kola's hands, turning to dust, its purpose fulfilled. The great Iroko tree, released from its duty as a lock, did not die. It shuddered, and from its ashen branches new leaves, shimmering with both golden light and silver shadow, began to sprout. When Kola lowered his hands, the world was different. The villagers were on their knees, weeping, clutching their heads. The Aiye stood in awe. In the center of it all stood Chief Bumidele, utterly exposed. The truth had stripped him bare. There were no more lies to tell. He dropped his weapon, his body slumping in defeat, and was silently taken away by two of his own former hunters, their faces hard with betrayal. Neoma approached Kola, her spear lowered. "You did not fight with a blade," she said, her voice filled with a new respect. "You fought with the one weapon he could not defend against." Kola walked to his father. Adewale was still staring, but the blankness in his eyes was now mixed with a dawning clarity, a slow, painful recognition as the psychic scars of the raw truth began to recede, soothed by the new, balanced energy of the world. The story of the mask that spoke when the sun fell became the new foundation of Ileri. The village learned to live in balance, no longer fearing the shadows, but understanding their necessity. They became stewards, not just sun catchers, carving masks that celebrated the whole truth of the world, light and dark. Kola, the boy who dared to wear the silence, became the leader who taught them to listen. And high above, the sun, Olorun, no longer just whispered, but sang a full-throated song, finally heard in all its complex and beautiful truth.